Good morning, great Americans. This is another great American video from the bunker. So I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to wax religiously only because of a couple items in the news. And I'm unscripted today because I'm sort of upset, and so I'm going off the cuff. So bear with me if I sort of meander a little bit, but I try to keep it short. Okay, so um, you know, two sort of separate issues in a way. Um, First one is Bill Maher. So, everybody's all praising Bill Maher for meeting with the president and coming off like a nice guy. Well, it certainly didn't take him long to revert. So he must have felt the pressure from somebody or something because he fell back into his nasty and he can be funny, but when you revert into nasty humor that's not funny and that's based on lies and false narratives, then it's not funny. Now you're back into the same old bullshit that everybody hates you for. So, you know, I mean, I'm not an expert comedian, but I do know that the funniest humor is usually based on truth, right? That's one of the reasons why people who do impersonations is so funny because it's so true to the person, right? That it's funny, right? Or stuff about like you know Trump, like Biden falling down, right? Or Trump's hair. It's funny because it's based in the truth. But when you make up lies and hateful things and that are terrible and rude, and then that's what you base your humor on, then it's not humor and it's not funny. And it's meant to be mean and cruel, and that's all it is. And Bill Maher has reverted to that, trying to kiss the ass of the left wing extremist freaks and woke idiots that make up his audience. So there you go. Never get too excited about when one of these left wing anti American enemies of liberty, when they seem to be coming your way, don't lavish them with too much praise until you see where it goes. Because with Mar, it was temporary at best, and now he's back to the same old Mar. So what did he say the other day that has to do with religion? So he made a terrible joke about I can't even say it. Well, I guess I have to say a little of it. He he made a terrible joke about why did J.D. Vance become a Catholic, and then he made a joke about little boys, and you can take it from there. So that's sick, and it's disgusting, and it's based on a lie, which brings me. So that's the end of Bill Maher, and now I'm going to go into the second topic because this is how they tie together. It's based on a gigantic lie, and it's a gigantic lie that has been perpetrated with the assistance of conservatives. And this brings me back to one of my. I haven't talked about this for years because it's sort of an old story. But man, for many years, and I still am really angry with my own side. Now, I consider us, if you've seen some of my recent videos, I consider us to be in a sort of we're in a civil war with patriotic Americans on one side and the disgusting degenerates on the left and the Democrats and the globalist left on the other side. It's a true civil war, and we have to win it. And I'm one of those people that believe when you're in a war, you do your best not to criticize your own side. So I get angry. I love Laura, like for example, Laura Loomer. I love Laura Loomer, but I get so pissed off when she's criticizing Trump. You give the man is trying to accomplish something monumental beyond our wildest. Give him a break. Can you lighten up for a minute? And the same with Ann Coulter. She just recently flip flopped over to Trump's side, as she was for him, then she was against him. She's for him, and then she was against him. Now she's for him. It's like, shut the fuck up. If you're going to be a fair weather friend, then just shut up and don't even be anything. In a time of civil war, just if you can't stick up for your side, then just shut up and stop giving aid to the enemy. So the whole bit about pedophile priests and priests and the priesthood and sexual things has always been a gigantic lie. Yeah, I'm one of the few people you're going to hear that from, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, right now, I'm not even going to speak to leftists and left wing right now because they're lost and they don't understand anything I'm talking about. Right now, I'm talking to you conservatives and you Trump supporters. You know, we all know darn good and well how the fake news can spin stories that are just lies and propaganda. We have seen so much lies and propaganda and fake news against Trump. It's just unbelievable. And you have now come to the realization that so-called news organizations can lie through their teeth. And yet, one of the biggest lies ever that was the precursor, think of the time frame here, the precursor to the left's full-on coordinated attack against the right in the news, which probably started around the time of Obama or maybe the end of Bush or something like that. The precursor to that was the attack against the Catholic Church. They had to knock out the Catholic Church before they started in on the right, because the Catholic Church is the biggest global entity and most powerful global entity that was on our side regarding abortion, gay marriage, just Christianity in general, you name it, right? And the Catholic Church was the big kid on the block, because the United States, that's just within our borders, but the Catholic Church was global. And they knocked it out with the whole big pedophile priest lie. But sadly, and here's the sad part, many conservatives who are otherwise good, patriots and Trump supporters and conservatives and Republicans and all that kind of stuff, a lot of them on the religious side are very anti-Catholic. And the thing that has always angered me is that they were willing to bite into the fake news narrative about the Catholic Church. And then later, when the fake news turned on them, and now, as we know, fake news is full on attacking conservatives. Now they know what it feels like, right? Now all of you conservatives, you know what it's like to be on the receiving end of a constant stream of fake news and propaganda and anti-American crap and all that. And yet you have never made the connection that if possible, that the same thing happened to the Catholic Church, because you wanted to believe those lies. Those lies fit in with your personal religious convictions. Now, there's a lot of Protestants of your not your old-fashioned, not your old-fashioned Protestants like your Lutherans and your Presbyterians and some of the original Protestants, right, that stem from Martin Luther and all those guys. But your newer brand of your evangelical and your fundamentalist and all those guys, they think that the Catholic Church is Antichrist and the Pope is Antichrist and the Catholic Church is of Satan. And you'll see all kinds of crazy. That's why you get all these movies from it. It makes me so angry. But because they believe that, they were willing to believe the lies that fake news put out about the Catholic Church. The same way that liberals today are willing to believe the lies that fake news puts out about Trump. So to all of you conservatives out there who actually believe the fake news lie about the church and pedophile priests and all that stuff, shame on you. Shame on you. Because you, for the last, 10 years or so, you have been the victim of fake news lies of all kinds against conservatives and Republicans. You know what it's like to be on the receiving end of propaganda and left-wing fake news from the likes of MSNBC and so forth. And yet you will turn around and you will believe those very same fake news sources when they tell the lies about the Catholic Church and the priests and all that. Here is the bottom line about the priesthood and Catholics and regarding regarding sexual improprieties. Two things to bear in mind, and when you put them both together, it exposes the big lie about pedophile priests. Okay, here's the first thing. The first thing is that statistics show that the vast majority of these cases involving priests, and I might add that these cases were allegations, never went to court. Let's remind ourselves, none of this stuff ever went to court. Well, there was like a few high-profile cases, like one or two. There was some guy in Massachusetts, I think. There was a couple of cases that actually were the real deal, one or two, but they used those to paint the entire priesthood. But almost every case never went to court. So just bear that in mind. In a country that believes that you're innocent until proven guilty, that almost or 99% of the allegations against priests never went to court. And many of them were like 30 years old. Think about that. So anyway, let me continue. All of these allegations, the vast majority of them had to do with boys who were in the teenage range, right? Teenagers and tweens and teenagers, or whatever you call it. Now, again, these are allegations that were never proven, but let's say some of them are true. For the sake of this discussion, that is not pedophilia. That is homosexuality. When you have a man, because all Catholic priests are men, and then you have a man has sexual whatever with a teenage boy, and let's face it, I say teenage boy, but a lot of teenage kids look like adults, right? Or they're built, some of them are pretty big on football teams and all kinds of stuff. That's sort of that's not pedophilia. Pedophilia is an attraction to prepubescent children, little kids, like kindergarten kids. If you're attracted to kindergarten kids, that's pedophilia. But if you're attracted to a full-grown man, if you're a man and you're attracted to another full-grown man, albeit he may by age, he may only be a teenager, but he may appear to be pretty much a man. That's a man being attracted to another man. That's homosexuality. That has been the problem in the church. See? Homosexuality was the main problem. But the mainstream media would never tell you that. Why? Because they promote homosexuality. The mainstream media and the left promotes homosexuality. They tell you that homosexuals are cool. They celebrate Pride Day. Oh, homosexuality can't be the problem. But it was. But they never told you that. Why? Because it was much better to call it pedophilia so that they could arouse anger and hatred toward the church. Why? Because of what I said at the beginning. The church was the big kid on the block, that block being the world, the big kid on the block when it came to being pro-life and pro-traditional marriage. That's why they wanted to take it down. That's why they called all these homosexual activities pedophilia, to arouse anger. And they did quite a good job. So that's the first thing, is that almost all of these cases were homosexual in nature and not pedophile in nature, which means that homosexuality in the priesthood is the real problem. Okay, now, why there's homosexuality in the priesthood, we can get to. Maybe I'll add that on at the end of the video. But for now, suffice to say that that's issue number one. Fake issue number one is pedophilia being the problem, which it wasn't. It was homosexuality. And again, remembering again that almost all of these cases never went to court anyway. So most of them probably aren't even true. But if they were true, then homosexuality would be the issue. Now, I'm not excusing those priests. Don't get me wrong here. I am not excusing those priests. If those priests had a sexual dalliance with, say, a 17-year-old boy, that's still a crime, and it still needs to be dealt with. So don't get me wrong. But it's not pedophile priests, okay? It's homosexuals. Sex with a 16-year-old or 17-year-old is still underage, and that's a crime. But it's not what everybody thinks it is. Just keep that in mind. So that's number one. Here's the big fake story number two. Part two. I just lost my train of thought. Okay. Here's number two. If, and this is not true, but even if all of those cases were pedophile cases, even if that was true, which it's not true. But even if it were true, the numbers indicate that the number of cases as a percentage of the men in the priesthood covering that time span, right? So you've got all of these cases covered like a period of 30 years, 35 years, or whatever it is. I can't remember. But they did the calculation. That time span, and then the number of priests in total, Catholic priests around the world for that time span, the percentage is lower than the percentage of pedophile cases among the population in general. Do you know what that means? That means if you want to look for a group of men, where pedophilia is prevalent, you don't look to the priesthood. The accusations of pedophilia among the male population in America is higher as a percentage than those accusations among just the priesthood. That means you are more likely to find a pedophile among your average American male, just in general, than you are in the priesthood. So you take these two things together, and what it means is the whole pedophile priest label and scenario is another gigantic lie. It's like the January 6th lie that Trump incited an insurrection. It's a lie. It's all a lie. It is a giant lie, and it's made me sick for years. And as I said, the thing that makes me sick, and the devastation wrought from this lie, all you stupid conservatives who bought into the lie, the devastation that has been wrought from this lie has hurt the American conservative movement drastically. Why? Because as among Christians in the United States, Catholics are the largest number of Christians, and their voice with politicians, which was once very strong and influential, has now been utterly destroyed. Remember the movie? Remember the movie Ghostbusters? Remember Ghostbusters? Remember when they're all in the mayor's office it's New York City, and they're with the New York mayor? And remember when the Catholic bishop walks in the door, and he says, "Hey Mike, how you doing?" They slap each other on the face, right? And hey Mike, and he sits down. It's funny, but it's also very realistic, because that's how it used to be. The bishops and the Catholic bishops and the cardinals wielded such influence that he could walk in to the New York mayor's office like that, sit down, and read and tell the mayor what time it is. Tell the mayor, and the mayor's going to fucking listen. And remember, the Catholic Church is the largest pro-life, pro-traditional Christian, or now I think it's the Church of God, but that's my religious thing coming in. But just from a secular point of view, it's the largest pro-life, pro-traditional marriage Christian organization on the entire planet by far. 1.5 billion Catholics, right? That run schools and charities and blah 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 blah. That voice was destroyed. You don't realize what a monumental loss was, but the left does, because they did it all on purpose. Because they knocked down that big, like in a game of chess, they went straight for one of the queen or a rook, knocked it down, and then now recently they've been trying to knock down every pawn and bishop and everything else with their full-throated attacks against the right. But the fake news, always remember, the fake news attacks against Trump, or the fake news attacks against conservatives and Republicans, which really ramped up in the time of Trump, but we're starting to ramp up like near the end of Bush and Obama. The precursor to that fake news onslaught was the fake news onslaught against the Catholic Church and the big lie about pedophile priests. So once again, just to recap, the fact is that almost every case involving priests and some sexual issue, first of all, never went to court. So I always thought that in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. But apparently, if you're a Catholic priest, you're guilty and you don't get your day in court. But none of these went to court. 99% of these things never went to court. They never had their day in court. That's number one. And that's number two, is that almost all of those cases involved homosexuals, not pedophiles, because it was men and boys ranging from 17 downward. When they started getting around the age 14 or 13 is when the numbers start dropping off drastically. And that's homosexuality. So there's your issue. Oh, actually, homosexuality. And again, let me reiterate, once again, for anybody who thinks I'm apologizing for, I'm not. What they did was still wrong, right? What they did was still wrong, and they still deserve to be punished for that. I don't know what the crime is. I guess it's statutory rape. Is that what it would be? A man and a 16-year-old boy. Is that what the crime is? But it's not pedophilia. Okay, so that's, you cannot. But here's my point. Here's my other point. Um, the reason why I'm going on about this is like, well, someone might be saying, well, what's the difference, man? They still did it. Yeah, but you cannot solve a problem unless you know what the problem is. You cannot cure a disease unless you know what the actual disease is. Right? Now, if the church is running around looking for pedophiles and that's not the problem, then that's not the problem. If the problem is homosexuals, then I can tell you what the cure is. Stop letting them into the seminaries. All right? And I'm going to leave you with one tiny tidbit of information about why priests were allowed in, why homosexuals were allowed into the seminary. All right? This is very simple. This is actually simple. Any Christian should understand this because it's very simple. We all have weaknesses to various sins, right? That's part of our fallen nature. Some, have a weakness for maybe gambling too much, overeating, that's gluttony, anger, sexual, a womanizer, guys out womanizing, or a nymphomaniac, addictions, drunkenness, and but anyway, we all have weaknesses towards various sins that we must overcome. That's our job, or that's one of our jobs as a Christian, is to overcome our weaknesses and grow in Christ. Homosexuals are no different. All right. The alcoholic must abstain from alcohol. The drug addict must abstain from drugs. The womanizer must be true and faithful to his wife. And the opposite is true too. The nymphomaniac must be true and faithful to her husband. All right. The overeater must control themselves and be on a good diet and be a glutton, right? The homosexual must remain chaste. We all have our burden to bear, and that's that. But simply being something in and of itself is not a sin. You have to actually act on it. If I'm an alcoholic, I'm not a sinner just because I'm an alcoholic. The sin comes in when I start drinking, when I actually do it, right? If you get it, the sin comes in when you commit the act. That is the sin. And the same goes for the homosexual. Just simply being a homosexual is not a sin. It's only when you start committing homosexual acts where the sin comes in, right? So this is the thinking why it's okay to let a homosexual into the priesthood, right? Because priests take a vow of celibacy and they're not going to have sex. So what's the problem? Because that's their thing, right? No problem, right? That's the theory. And in theory, it sounds good, right? But unfortunately, we found out that in practice, not so good. Because it's human nature that you give into temptation. Like the glutton who's on a diet. How many people have gone on a diet and then broken their diet? I mean, come on, man. How many alcoholics have tried to be clean and sober and then they relapse? If you go to an AA meeting, that's a constant story. Oh, when I first started getting clean and then I relapsed. And then you go, maybe they go through a couple of relapses and then they finally get clean and sober. Why did they not think that a homosexual would do the same thing? He takes a vow of celibacy. Maybe he's good with it for a few years. Then he relapses. And there's a young boy. It was a dumb thing to do. But they let him in. And by the way, I might also add that for those homosexuals who recognize that homosexual acts are a sin, many of them actually sought out to be a priest, thinking the same thing. If I become a priest, this is going to help me focus, and I can remain chaste, and I can, it's going to help me. It's kind of like a guy who's an alcoholic, and maybe he thinks if he moves up to the mountains, where there's no liquor stores and no bars, right? Maybe that will help me stay clean and sober, right? But we all know from addicts and stuff that kind of thinking doesn't work. You can't escape your addiction. It will always follow you, and you'll find a way to get into it. The same thing happened here. So these guys think, wow, well, they realize that there are homosexuals, by the way, who realize that homosexuality is a mental disorder. Not all, some of them are, you'll never hear about them in the news, but there are plenty who have not bought into the big lie from modern society that homosexual is normal. There are some who are in groups, and there are groups, you may not realize it, but there's groups, they're kind of like AA, similar, right? AA, where they get together. So anyway, a lot of them thought the same thing. Oh, this is the best way to get away from it, right? I'm going to join the priesthood, and no sex is allowed, and perfect for me, right? Doesn't work that way. Your weakness will always follow you. You can't run away from it. You can't hide from it. So it was folly and to let them into the priesthood. And while it seemed to make sense in theory, in practice, it did not work out well. So that's where the problem started. So the cure to the problem is you can't let them into the priesthood. You can't let them in. It's as simple as that. No offense. There's a lot of people who can't get into the priesthood. So women, for example, right? So don't take it personal. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's the issue. That's a very different issue than what I usually address here. So anywho, I want to remind you about my theme for the next 3.5 years of the Trump presidency. My theme is stay the course. Please see, I have 3 videos about stay the course. And 2 of them are called The War Has Just Begun. And then the next one is called The War Has Just Begun. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, 2 of them are called The War Has Just Begun, and the third one is called Stay the Course. But they all have the stay the course theme, which is stand with Trump. He is doing monumental things, and the naysayers and the voices from the fake news people are getting wobbly knees. They're getting nervous. And don't do that. We are in a war. We are in a civil war against the evil of the globalist left. And you got to stick with Trump. Stand with Trump. Trust Trump. Do not get wobbly knees. And remember that what we're in right now with Trump is the beginning of what's going to be a civil war that's going to last for decades. You cannot let down your guard. Stick with Trump. And when the next elections come around in 2026 for Congress, stick with Trump. Vote for the people that he says he needs. And then in 2028, when we vote for the next president, vote for the MAGA candidate. Remember, making America great again is a movement, and it will live on, and it must move forward even after Trump is gone. Now, I don't know who that candidate is going to be. Maybe Vice President Vance. I'm a little fuzzy on DeSantis. I'm not so sure about DeSantis. Vance is good. Probably a couple of ladies out there that are pretty good too. But anyway, stand with Trump. This must be our banner moving forward for the next 3.5 years and beyond. Stand with Trump. Do not get weak. Do not get nervous. Do not believe the lies that Trump's tariffs are not working or this is not working. He's going to have to fire Pete Hanks and all that. Don't believe any of the lies. It's working. Stay the course. Stand with Trump. That is the clarion call for the next 3.5 years and beyond. Remember that. And I will see you in the next great American. Click the links in the description of this. I'm going to put a few links. And I will see you in the next great American video. Adios, muchachos.